Hi, this is Mr. Snyder with Truman Middle School, and today we're going to learn about congruence. Today's learning objective is to learn to use properties of congruent figures in order to solve problems. Before we begin, we'll go over the vocabulary. Recall that congruent means exactly the same size and same shape, and that can be for angles or sides or the shape itself. Correspondence is simply a way of matching up two sets of objects, such as the sides or angles of certain shapes. If two polygons are congruent, all of their corresponding angles and sides will also be congruent. So today we're going to be making congruent statements where we match up vertices from one polygon to another in order to show their correspondence to each other. Recall that if you see a figure, it's helpful to know that two sides are congruent if they have the same amount of marks. For instance, if side AB was congruent to QR, they would be marked with a single mark. BC, if it's congruent to PR, might be marked with two marks, and AC, if it's congruent to PQ, could be marked with three marks. This is a way of simply just matching up sides of a polygon. So here's our first example, and notice the marks that we spoke of. Look for the single mark, and that will match up sides. Double marks match up other sides, and then the triple mark would match up the third side. So in order to write a congruent statement, we simply start matching up angles. So since angle A has a right angle and angle Q also has a right angle, we could write that angle A is congruent to angle Q. So angle A corresponds to angle Q. Similarly, if we take B, the measure of 35, we could match that with R, which also has a measure of 35, so B corresponds to angle R. Also, C with a measure of 55 degrees would match up with P, so angle C corresponds to angle P and is congruent to angle P. So in order to write a congruent statement, we would simply write all three letters together, and order is of the utmost importance. So angle A matches up with Q, B matches up with R, and C matches up with P. So we would say triangle ABC is congruent to triangle QRP. That is our congruent statement. So let's look at our next example. Now we have pentagons. So we start by matching up letter to letter and angle to angle. So choose a letter and corresponding angle to that letter, such as D. I'm going to choose angle D, which is 92 degrees, and I will go over to the right-hand shape and find its corresponding angle, which would be M. Angle M is also 92. So I could say angle D is congruent to angle M. So they correspond to each other. Then find the next angle. Angle E has a measure of 88 degrees, and that corresponds to angle N, which also has 88. So I could write a congruent statement. Angle E is congruent to angle N. And I could proceed in this manner. I could match up F to O. I could match up G to P. And I could match up H to Q. Notice each time that the angles are congruent to each other. We have matching angles, so we match up the letters. And now I can write a congruent statement. And I'm going to say that pentagon DEFGH is congruent to pentagon MNOPQ. So I'm simply matching letter for letter on both of those shapes. In our third example, we're going to look at this a little bit more algebraically because it's going to be similar to solving a one or two-step equation. So my question wants me to find A, lowercase a, and lowercase a is associated with side WX of the left-hand quadrilateral. So we have to first match up our corresponding side to the quadrilateral, which would be KL on the right-hand quadrilateral. So we can set up a plus 8 is equal to 24 and simply solve for a. So we would solve this just like a one-step equation by subtracting 8 from both sides, and we'll find out that A equals 16. If we wanted to find B, first we must locate lowercase b, which is associated with side ML. And we need to match ML up with its corresponding side of the other quadrilateral to the left, which would be yx. So ML is congruent to yx, so I can set 6b equal to 30 and solve algebraically with a one-step equation by dividing both sides by 6, and we would find that b equals 5. The last thing we might want to find is c, and c is associated with angle J, and J corresponds to angle V of our left-hand quadrilateral, so we can set 5C equal to 85 because they are corresponding angles, so then we know they are congruent to each other. So 5C equals 85, dividing by 5 on both sides, we would find C equals 17. So those examples should help us complete tonight's homework. If you have any questions, email either myself or Mr. Chrisman, and happy studying.